All right, so in this video, we're just going to talk about how to create a little special effects brush. We're going to show you a couple videos on how to do that. We're going to talk about flares, show you some textures and different techniques you can use to create brushes. The reason we want to show you how to create a brush is because you might find a really cool effect like a light flare or a smoke or something like that, and you could find the transparent version and just drop it on top of an image. But by making it a brush, you have more control over it. So you can resize it, make it smaller or larger. You can add layer styles to it to change the color, and you can do other effects with it that you can't do if you just had a transparent, like a PNG file of it and just dropped it on top. So by learning how to create things and turn them into brushes, it makes it more versatile for you for other projects. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by opening up an image. And I just found an image online that was free of a lens flare or a little light flare. Okay, just like that. So this is what we're going to start with. So we want to create this and have this as a brush that I can edit and make into different colors or different sizes. I can make it small or large, whatever I need to. So that's what we're going to do with this. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to resize it. So I'm going to go to image, image size. And right now, make sure it's pixels. I'm at 1300 pixels. I'm going to change it to 3000. Make it a little bit larger. And okay. And then Control 0 kind of shrinks that back to fit into the artboard. Okay. Next thing I want to do is I want to desaturate it. I want to get rid of all the colors, so it's just black and white. Shift, Control, and U. Hold Shift and Control down and hit U. Will automatically desaturate your image just like that. Okay. So in Photoshop, when you're creating a brush or just in general, black is hides, like it's opaque, right? And then gray is kind of in the middle, like in between. It's somewhat opaque, somewhat transparent, and white is transparent. It's kind of how layer masks work as well, right? White reveals, black hides. Same concept. So right now, if we were to turn this into a brush, my brush would be the black background and the white flare would be missing or transparent. So we want to do the opposite of that, okay? So what I want to do is I want to invert this. So I'm going to go to layer, new adjustment layer, and I'm going to click on invert. And I'm going to hit OK. So what I did is I inverted, I flipped it. So now what was white is black and what is black is white. So this is going to look more like what we want to use for the brush. If I go to my layers panel, you'll see it's just an adjustment layer. So we're going to have to change something. We're going to have to combine these a little bit actually to work with this a little better. So if I have this bottom layer, I unlocked it, and then I'm going to hold down the shift button and select my adjustment layer that I just made. I'm going to right click on it and I'm going to hit merge layers. So I'm going to merge into one layer, and I'll explain why. Because one thing, you might not have to do this step. So the reason I'm doing this step in terms of merging it is because my flare goes to the edge of the artboard. So if I were to make this into a brush, I would have these hard edges where the flare would just stop and you'd notice it. It would look like a square box around my flare. So we don't want that. We want to soften those edges up a little bit. So we're going to use the gradient tool to do that. And if I were to do this with that separate layer, it would cause some issues. So by merging it into one layer, it's going to make it a lot easier to do this. So I click on my gradient tool, and then up in this drop-down menu here, you're going to make sure to open up basics. And then you're going to select this middle one, which is foreground color to transparent. So I click on that. And then you want to make sure down here on your swatches that white is the foreground color. Okay. If it's not, if it's black, you'll see it changes up here. So if this is what yours looks like, just come down to your swatch here and hit this little arrow, this little switch arrow, and it'll switch those two colors out. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click and drag my mouse to create a transparency. So what it's doing is it's saying I want to go from white at the top here to transparent, which is into my flare. But you'll notice that that flare is not touching the edge anymore. So I'm softening that edge up. So I'm going to do the same thing from all sides here. I'm going to bring that in there. Bring that in there. Actually, you know what? I'm going to undo that. Control Z is undo. I'm going to go a little bit shorter just because I want this flare, this part of the flare to be longer. So these flares, I'm going to bring these up a little bit closer. So see how that kind of shortens it a little bit? I might go back and do this one again. Yeah, so what I'm trying to do is make it more narrow and long looking as opposed to just like a big circle. So I might even come from the sides here and bring those in a little bit, just up in the upper the upper areas. I'm going to come down here a little bit lower. There we go. Okay, so that's pretty good. I like where that's going. And now what we're going to do is we're going to bring the levels down a little bit, because even though this looks pretty white, if there's any type of gray, it's going to affect the brush. So what I'm going to do is go over to my layers panel, and I'm going to click on adjustment layer. Oops, layer mask, I'm sorry. There's adjustment layer. And I'm going to click on levels. And I'm going to grab my white, and I'm just going to bring it in a little bit. And what it's going to do is it's going to purify the white a little bit on the edges there, so I don't have any of that. I don't mind the transparent in the middle here. It'll add some color. But for the brush, I want to make sure the edges are pretty pure white. So that's pretty good right there as it is. Okay. Now what I want to do is I'm pretty set here. So we've taken the image, we've desaturated it, we inverted it so that the flare, the part that we want to be a brush, is black and the background is white. We cleaned up the edges a little bit with a gradient so that it's not touching the edge and it kind of almost fades off a little bit better. And then we use the levels adjustment layer to kind of make this edge a pure white, so there's no chance of a border, and it kind of brings it out a little bit. Now we're going to convert it into a brush, and this is the easy part. So we're going to go to edit, and then down here, we're going to have to combine these two layers again. So I'm going to click on that levels, hold down shift, click invert, and I'm going to merge layers. So I'm going to merge it into one layer. Now I go to edit, and then define brush preset. So what it will do is when you click that, it'll automatically give it a name based on whatever the file is. So I would just get in the habit of naming your brushes anytime you make one. So this one I'm just going to call Flare 1. You can see it's got like a little thumbnail image of what it looks like. So you'll be able to see it in your brushes panel, but it's always good to just get in the habit of naming things. So I'm just going to name it Flare 1. And you can see already it switches right to the brush, and you can see what my brush looks like. So that's what the edge of it looks like. Let's see what it actually looks like if we use the brush. So I'm going to click on the new layer. I'm going to hold down Alt and hit delete. I'm going to actually backspace. Control delete. Boom, there it is. Man, switching those things around, I get confused. So Control and delete will actually fill your new layer with your background color. So my background color was black. So that's what I did. So I created a new layer, held down Control and hit delete, and it filled it with the background color. Alt and delete fills it with the foreground color. So that's where I got confused there. All right, so now I've got that background layer that's all black. I'm going to create another new layer that's transparent, and then I'm going to use my brush on that layer. And see, here's the really cool thing. You can see my edges here. I'm going to hit my plus sign. I'm sorry, the brackets. Man, there you go. My right bracket increases the size, and my left bracket decreases. So I have more control now. I'm going to click over here, and there's my flare. And then this one, I'm going to use the right bracket and make it bigger. So I got that right there. You can even paint with it if you wanted to. You want to do something interesting to see what it can do. But those are really cool things you can do with that flare. So it looks just like we had it in the image there, except it's black and white, right? So how do we add color? Really simple. One thing I'm going to do with this one, let me see if I can delete that. It deletes all of them, unfortunately. It's all right. New layer, go back to my brush. Let's do one big one right in the middle. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down in my layers panel, and there you have the layers style, the FX symbol. If I click on layer style and I click on outer glow, and you can see I practiced this, so it's already there a little bit. But what we're going to do is you can select the color you want. So for our image, let's say we want to do a red one, right? The image we brought in was blue. So I'm going to double click this here, and I can choose whatever color I want. Pink. Let's do a pink one. How about that? And then you can play around with the blend modes. Hard light seems to work the best. So I'm going to stick with the blend mode of hard light, but you can play around with it. It might be different for whatever image you're working with, but to start with, try hard light. And then the opacity, how much of it you want to see. Again, that depends on what you want to show. Noise, I'd keep it at 0, but if you want a little bit of a noise texture, you can totally do that. But you can see now, when I pull this over, what that flare looks like. Okay, so now I got that pink flare. It's going all the way to the edge. So I can bring down the opacity a little bit, and it'll be a little bit more natural. See how the edges are coming in a little? So that's kind of cool. That's a really cool effect with that. And then here's what noise would look like. So if I want to bring in the noise, you can see on the edges there's a little bit of graininess to it. So that might be a really cool effect if you want kind of a retro look. So again, those are things you can play around with to get the look that you want. But I can double click here and I can change this and go to green, go to blue, reddish orange there, dark orange. So you can change it to any color you want. So this gives you so much more control than just having a transparent flare and trying to have to search for the colors you want or the shape that you want. You can find one, edit, and transform it and use it however you want to. And it's always in your brushes panel because you've created that. So that is a quick way to make a flare brush.